Argentinian people say goodbye to the grandmother of Plaza de Mayo, Rosa Roisinblit, at the age of 106 years old, with an enormous work and career as a human rights referent in the country and in the world. In the United States, thousands of people gathered in Washington, D.C. to protest against the Trump administration's military occupation of the U.S. Capitol, as well as the systematic harassment of immigrants by Immigration and Customs Enforcement ICE. In the Gaza Strip, at least 20,000 children have lost their lives at the hands of Israel since October 2023. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Sophie Fernandez from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Argentinian people say goodbye to the grandmother of Plaza de Mayo, Rosa Roisinblit, at the age of 106 years old, with an enormous work and career as a human rights referent in the country and in the world. Rosa Roisinblit was one of the founders of Grandmothers of Plaza de Mayo, and central figure in the struggle for the identification of the children kidnapped or born in captivity during the last Argentine civil-military dictatorship. Rosita, as she was also known, was born on August 15, 1990, in Moisés Villé province of Santa Fe. Her daughter Patricia was one of the 30,000 people kidnapped by the dictatorship that lasted between 1976 and 1982. While Rosa's daughter was never found, the child she birthed in captivity, Guillermo, was found in 2000. The grandmother of Plaza de Mayo declared Rosa Roisinblit as its honorary president. Also in Argentina, the Ministry of Human Capital acknowledged that the audit Milei's government claimed to have carried out to justify the cessation of food assistance to soup kitchens does not exist. It occurred after a request for access to public information filed by the National Deputy of Buenos Aires, Natalia Sahracho, on May 16, 2024. This request came one day after the head of cabinet, Nicolás Posse, announced in Congress that nearly 50% of the soup kitchens were not existent, based on an alleged audit. The Ministry of Human Capital admitted that the audit turns out to be non-existent. Claims based on the alleged audit served to suspend the supply of provisions to soup kitchens, leaving millions of kilos of food undistributed, many of them in the verge of expiration. In other news, in the Dominican Republic, demonstrations were held in rejection of U.S. threats to intervene in Venezuela. On Saturday, several political, social and popular organizations raised their voices in Santo Domingo to support the Venezuelan people and reject the new interferences of Washington. They also accused the Dominican government of acting as a vessel of the United States with the deployment of ships near the Venezuelan coast. Demonstrators reaffirmed their solidarity with Venezuela and demanded respect for the sovereignty of Latin America and the Caribbean.
To the world and the international organizations of the United Nations and the Security Council and the OAS, that they make prevail the international law of respect for the self-determination of the peoples and the national sovereignty of each one of the nations, the United States and Europe, and no nation, no matter how powerful it may be, should interfere in the internal affairs of any country. Venezuela, like all the nations of the world, has the right to determine what economic and political system it will build. And that is a decision of its people, of its nationals. It is a shame that internationally powerful nations are trying to undermine the sovereignty and self-determination of Venezuela, Nicaragua, Cuba, and other nations of the world.
En este caso, de lo que se trata es de que el imperio no puede tolerar que un país.
In this case, the empire cannot tolerate a sovereign country deciding what to do with its own destiny. In the case of Venezuela, what we are talking about is the search for legitimate ways, obviously, to appropriate the natural resources of Venezuela. That is why it is a moral duty to condemn the presence of the United States in the Caribbean. Condemn the military maneuvers in which the Caribbean is involved at this moment, and tell them that if they want to do something good for humanity, they should stop the genocide in Gaza, to solve their internal problems and allow the countries, in this case Venezuela, to decide their destiny in a sovereign manner.
En este caso, Venezuela, su destino de manera soberana.
In Honduras, the left-wing Liberty and Refundation Party, Libre, launched a massive rally on Saturday in the municipality of Trojes in El Paraíso to support the party's presidential candidate, Risi Moncada, for the upcoming November 30th general elections. During the act, Moncada reiterated her proposal of universal scholarships and job availability for the youth, as well as her support to education and health programs. Also, on her post made on the social media X, she highlighted her support to agricultural producers and her concern for the budget of the University of Agriculture. Finally, Moncada thanked the current president Xiomara Castro for her legacy and pledged to move forward with the refundation program with the support of the Honduran people. Meanwhile, in Brazil, Independence Day is celebrated on September 7th, commemorating the moment when the country declared its independence from the Portuguese colonial empire in 1822. The demonstrations of this special day in Brazil's role on the world stage, especially through cooperation with the emerging powers of the BRICS group, are fundamental to the country's national identity and geopolitical influence. Patriotic Day, as is also known, is a public holiday in Brazil, during which the country celebrates its freedom and cultural identity. In addition to the official ceremonies, cities throughout the country host various cultural events, concerts, folkloric dances, and fireworks, reflecting the diversity and pride of the Brazilian people. In the context of the commemoration of Independence Day, Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva condemned those he described as traitors to the country on Saturday and affirmed that there would be no room for foreign interference during his administration. The president's message was delivered during an official radio and television address on the eve of Independence Day in the South American giant. This speech was a clear rejection of the sanctions imposed by President Donald Trump against the Supreme Federal Court justices and the ministers of his cabinet, a retaliatory measure for the criminal trial facing former President Jair Bolsonaro for the 2023 coup conspiracy. President Lula's speech also targeted Brazilian politicians who encouraged attacks against Brazil, which he considered unacceptable.
We are not, and will not be, a colony of anyone again. We are capable of governing and taking care of our land and our people, without interference from any foreign government. We maintain friendly relations with all countries, but we do not accept orders from anyone. It is inadmissible the role of some Brazilian politicians who encourage attacks against Brazil. They were elected to work for the Brazilian people, but they defend only their personal interests. They are traitors to the homeland. History will not forgive them.
And now we have a short break coming up. But first, remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. In the United States, thousands of people gather in Washington, D.C. to protest against the Trump administration's military occupation of the U.S. Capitol, as well as the systematic harassment of immigrants orchestrated by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. Protesters raised their voices against arbitrary arrest, the criminalization of immigration, and the authoritarian policies imposed by the government. They also demanded an end to raids, respect for human rights, and public policies that guarantee employment and decent housing for the most vulnerable sectors. It is worth noting that churches are raising their bells in support of the protest that is taking place from Malcolm X Park to Liberty Square. In August, U.S. President Donald Trump announced the deployment of federal agents and National Guard troops to confront what he described as a criminal wave. Since then, over 600 arrests have been made, many of them of undocumented people. Also in the United States, federal immigration authorities and ICE agents carried out another operation in a chocolate factory in northern New York. State Governor Kathy Hochul announced that among those detained were parents of at least a dozen children, who risked returning home from school to an empty house. The action, described as frightening by the owner of the company, resulted in the detention of between 50 and 60 workers, most of whom were of Latin origin. Also in the U.S., Pentagon officials have described the U.S. attack on a boat off the Caribbean waters of the Venezuelan coast as a crime against civilians. According to the web publication The Intercept, the officials said that the White House paved the way for this operation by dismissing, early this year, the top legal advisors for the Army and the Air Force, thus eliminating critical counterweights to enable the direct targeting of civilians. According to this article, this is part of a pattern where the Pentagon claims to eliminate alleged terrorists, while actually killing civilians, as documented in a drone strike in Somalia in 2018. The article also reveals that the designation of the Arawa Train and other criminal groups as terrorists predating this attack created a fictitious legal framework for a military aggression, evidenced by the renewed military encirclement, which includes 4,500 troops, 7 warships, and a nuclear-powered submarine to the Caribbean region. Now we move to Ethiopia, where the second Africa CARICOM Summit will be held on Sunday in Addis Ababa, with the aim of strengthening historical, political, and economic ties between African countries and the members of the Caribbean community. Under the slogan Transcontinental Association in the Pursuit of Restorative Justice for Africans and People of African Descent Through Reparations, the meeting seeks to consolidate a common agenda in the face of shared challenges and to promote South-South cooperation. The Prime Ministers of Antigua and Barbuda, the Bahamas, Saint Vincent and Grenadines, Saint Kitts and Nevis, Barbados and Grenada are already in the Ethiopian capital to participate in the enclave. In addition, the Caribbean diaspora in Ethiopia will host a meeting focused on strengthening cultural and political relations between Africa and the Caribbean. In Vietnam, heavy rainfall has caused severe flooding and the collapse of several houses in Lam Dong province. According to official reports, emergency teams are helping villagers in the Hiep Tang commune to evacuate risk areas as soon as possible. The floods have affected one main road and 5 villages. At least 500 houses are affected. Some have completely collapsed and others present serious structural damage, while the number of flood victims is in the hundreds. More on torrential rains and flooding. In India, authorities have confirmed the death of at least 90 people due to flooding in the areas of Uttarakhand, Punjab, Jammu, Kashmir and New Delhi. Also, authorities have ordered the evacuation of thousands of citizens who have been transferred to designated safe areas. And in Afghanistan, search and rescue operations have concluded following the 6.0 earthquake that struck the country on August 31st, leaving 2,200 dead and 4,000 injured. Authorities emphasized that this was one of the worst tragedies the country has ever experienced, leaving entire communities destroyed. Among the most affected regions are Kunar, Nuristan and Laghman, which are facing a severe humanitarian crisis. It should be noted that civil protection teams set up camps for displaced families in several locations, and the organized distribution of primary and emergency humanitarian aid continues. Now we have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to visit our Facebook page at teleSUR English. There you'll be able to watch our top stories, special live coverage and much more. Follow our page and activate the notification button to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Final short break coming, don't go away. Welcome back. The number of people who have died of starvation rises to 382 amid the Israeli blockade of the Gaza Strip since October 2023. The Gaza Health Department has recorded 6 deaths from starvation and malnutrition in the last 24 hours, including one infant. As a result, the total number of deaths from starvation has reached 382, of which 135 are children. At the same time, Israel is preventing thousands of food products from entering the territory, including vital items such as meat, fish, eggs, fruit and vegetables, as well as certain types of dairy products. The malnutrition caused by the Israeli blockade of the Palestinian coastal enclave currently affects 43,000 children under the age of 5 and more than 55,000 pregnant and breastfeeding women. On the other hand, in the Gaza Strip, at least 20,000 children have lost their lives at the hands of Israel since October 2023. In this regard, Palestinian authorities warn that on average, one child has been fatally wounded every hour. It is also estimated that another 132,000 could die of hunger if the airstrikes, ground operations, and the blockade of humanitarian aid imposed by the Israeli army continue. It is important to note that the number of injured Palestinian children has reached 42,000, and that minors compared to adults are 7 times more likely to die from injuries caused by explosions. Meanwhile, in Israel, thousands of people gathered in Hostage Square demanding that Benjamin Netanyahu's regime stop the attack on Gaza and agreed with Hamas resistance movement of the exchange of prisoners. Protesters accused the Israeli Prime Minister of indefinitely prolonging the conflict and the captivity of the hostages for political reasons while clinging to power. Israel citizens fear that the new military authorities in Tel Aviv will risk the life of the detained families members. Amid the Zionist aggression that has killed more than 64,000 Palestinian civilians since October 7, 2023. And in Chile, social and political organizations demonstrated in front of La Moneda Palace on the International Day of Solidarity with Palestine. The participants demanded that the government end relations with the Zionist State of Israel. In this regard, lawyer Nelson Haddad is conducting a global campaign to collect nearly 100,000 signatures and calls for Israel to be expelled from the United Nations. It is important to note that Chile is home to the largest community of Palestinian descendants outside the Middle East. And in the United Kingdom, over 300 people have been arrested during protests in support of the Palestinian people. With Palestinian flags and support banners, participants rejected the escalation of Israeli aggression against the Gaza Strip. Under strict security measures, the British police arrested the protesters for considering the protest a violation of the country's anti-terrorism law. These Saturday's demonstrations are part of a series of actions that have taken place in several cities around the world against the advance of the Zionist genocide in Gaza. In other news, in Greece, a crowd of people gathered outside the parliament building to demand answers from the government about the Tempe train accident, which occurred in 2023. The protest took place in Syntagma Square, 1 week after the investigating judge decided to close the case after 2 years of investigations. The accident occurred shortly before midnight of February 28, 2023, when a passenger train collided with a freight train on the line between Athens and Thessaloniki, claiming the lives of 57 people. In China, over 500 representatives from 110 countries of the Global South inaugurated a forum focused on strengthening alliances in the face of a scenario marked by disinformation and fake news. The Forum of Media and Think Tanks of the Global South also marks the formal launch of the network of joint communication associations of the Global South, which brings together more than 1,000 media, think tanks, and other institutions from 95 nations and regions. This forum becomes a platform to articulate the voices of the South in an international scenario, marked by inequality and the concentration of power in the big media centers. Like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net, and also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For telesur English, I'm Sophie Fernandez. Thank you for watching.